Okay, so we are looking at the English A CSEC review, and we are going to understand the paper too. We are going to look at the mark scheme and look at an example of a paper and how to approach this paper. Okay, so first thing I want us to know and understand is that you will be marked on two profiles. The first profile would be the understanding, um, and the second profile would be the expression. Okay, so I want you to know that the understanding profile is really easy to get full marks. You can get an A in that profile because it really tests your comprehension skills, whether or not you can figure out what is being said or what is being presented in front of you. The part that a lot of students struggle with is the expression profile. So I want us to go through each section and see how we should approach or how we should write what is being tested or required of us. All right. So, right. All right. So section A, we know section A is summary writing. We have understanding and expression. Right. Profile 1 and profile 2. Profile 1, we see content. Content is only 5 marks in summary writing. And I know you might have expected more marks because the entire section is 25 marks. But profile 1 only gives you 5 marks. So your aim really is to get 5 marks. You have to get total marks in this section. So your response will be judged for its adequacy with respect to the following criteria within the set word limit. So we know that the word limit is 120. Anything after 120 will not be marked. Okay, so selection and accuracy and completions of main points identified. So we know that with summary writing, we have to be able to read through the passage and select the main point. So you have to be able to do that. It's important to read what is this passage about? What is it telling me? What do I understand by it? And take it from paragraph to paragraph and complete your main points. Achieve the purpose and intent of the message. So again, this is where your understanding is tested, whether or not you understand what the passage is about, as and establishing a tone with roughly similar features. Okay, so simple, sounds easy. Content, 5 marks. Let's look at the expression profile. Organization of content. So this, yes, your content is important and your main point, selecting your main points is important. However, organizing your content gives you that mark. So we have 20 marks for organization of content, right? So I'm going to do a further breakdown for you. I want to just refer to mechanics. What is mechanics? Because many times we talk about language usage, but sometimes we are not too clear on mechanics. So mechanic refers to the rules of written language, right? So many times children or let me not say children, let me say students forget simple things like your punctuation marks, your capitalization. These things are crucial in your writing. Okay. Um, your response will be judged for the arrangement of material with regard to sequencing, your coherence, your concisiveness, and the sense of audience. So you are to take a large piece of writing and summarize it into something um, into 120 words or less, right? And I want you to know that this is how you will get your marks by arrangement of materials with regard to sequencing. So your main points ought to be in a particular order. So we're not going to have point three. We're not going to find that in the beginning of your writing, but it must flow in order. Organization is critical in writing on the whole, right? Coherence simply means being able to um, link your writing together. So we don't want to just have sentences that seem to just appear out of nowhere, but it must flow and it must sound right. Okay, conciseness, we know that it has to be short, and maintain your sense of audience. This is where they say establish a tone, right? So do not lose your audience. Remember that you are not changing the writing, you are just summarizing it. Okay. Okay, so profile two. So we are continuing on right, so we are continuing and we are looking at language usage. So, again, expression has different parts as we saw just now. There is organization of content, which is 10 marks, and language usage and mechanics, which is another 10 marks. And that is how you get your entire 20 marks, right? So, language usage, you have to be able to use correct structure of language. So sentences must be complete. Sentences must be clear and meaningful. There must be effective and appropriate transition between sentences and between paragraphs. Subjects and verbs must agree. Pronouns must agree. There must be consistency in the use of tenses. So you you are accustomed doing this. I don't have a problem with language use for your essays. However, I want you to be mindful that there must be effective and appropriate transition between sentences and between paragraphs. So that is a big thing in terms of how to approach this particular section, right? And the example that we would be looking at today, you would kind of see, you'll kind of have an idea of what is expected of you or how your summary should look. So we have accuracy of mechanics. So again, as I told you, mechanics are things such as correct spelling and punctuation, use of capital, full stop, comma, question marks, etc. Okay. So that, before I go on to section B, let me just go to straight to the example that I have for that section. It'll be easier for me to do it like that for you. Okay, so this is an example of what is expected of you in section A. So section A, it's 25 marks, as we know. Suggested time is 35 minutes. And pay attention to suggested time because it kind of helps you to know how to flow. So whether or not you are going to take 10 minutes to understand or 15 minutes to understand, and you have to be able to split your time as to how much time you need to write. So if you need 15 minutes to write, and let's say 20 minutes to plan or to focus on your content, then do so, right? Um, Read the instructions clearly. So the instructions said, do not use more than 120 words. Pay attention to that. Your summary must be in continuous prose, in paragraph form, and as far as possible in your own words. So that is the instruction. So let's look at the passage that was given. Um, I'm not sure which paper I took this from, but I took it from a past paper, right? So it says, the Caribbean is well known around the world for its prowess in sports such as cricket, athletics, boxing, football, and netball. During the last decade, much attention has been given in some countries to coaching, administration, sponsorship, and physical preparation. Good as this is, it is not enough. Physical training is essential for success in sports, but the very best results can only come through a combination of professional training and good nutrition. In the Caribbean, unfortunately, very little planning has gone into nutritional aspects of the athlete's preparation before, during, and after sporting events. The athletes need to recognize that performance during the competitive season is strongly related to nutritional status outside the competitive season. Although there are necessary changes in the quantity and quality of diet during competition, the overall approach should be in keeping with basic dietary guidelines for healthy eating. Nowhere is the need for proper nutrition more evident than in sports. The ability to succeed in sports requires good health based on a diet that provides all the essential nutrients in the correct amount over a period of time. Many of our athletes often ignore the most vital parts of the diet. Food containing Food containing vitamins and minerals that provide stamina and endurance, in favor of fast food that lacks nutrients. Will the average balanced diet that brings health benefits in the presence of normal physical activity also be adequate for people engaged in increased physical activity and competitive sports? Many athletes do not think so, and they are therefore exposed to and are tempted by numerous fads and diets which they expect to improve their performance. The pressure to use performance enhancing drugs is increasing dramatically because of the lure of lucrative prices, contracts, product endorsements. This has tempted sportspersons, particularly in athletics, to engage in illegal practices. But drug use not only negates the spirit of human competition, it can be hazardous to health. We should never forget that there is life after retirement from the sport. And most importantly, we should give the public and fans the proof that our heroes are in fact drug free and worthy role models. It's very weird that I'm doing this recording um, at 6 o'clock in the morning because I was reading something to you and I thought it was actually on the screen. However, it was not there because I forgot to share a new screen. But it's fine. Um, Based on what I read so far, I think you would have grasped this passage should be about sports in the Caribbean and something about healthy eating, right? Because it's book about having the balanced nutrients, and it spoke about um, things such as vitamins, minerals, and the combination of physical activities and foods. So we kind of already, based on our prior knowledge in terms of what we know about athletes, knowing that athletes ought to have balanced diet, we kind of grasp at that. And this is supposed to be an easy 5 marks for understanding in this section. So let me go ahead now and share. Okay, so I'm seeing that my screen is actually sharing there. Right. So, okay, so this is how we would go about selecting the relevant main ideas, right? Okay, so we know that we will only be assessed on our first 120 words, right? Key when we are doing summary writing. So, the first point, and usually the main point is in the first line. If it's not in the first line, it's somewhere in the second. In the if it's not in the first line, you'll find it in the second line, somewhere around there. The main ideas, right? So we know that it begins by saying the Caribbean is well known around the world, right? For sports. That is what the first line says. So that is an ideal point to have when we are summarizing, right? So we can say in our own words, the Caribbean is famous for its role in sports. We know people like Usain Bolt. We know Jamaica has a lot of athletes. We know that for cricket, we know the Caribbean is known for cricket. So, based on what we know and what the world knows for in sport, they would automatically associate us to things like athletics and cricket. Not so much football, but um, you get that sense of what I'm trying to say. Right. And then they have the second point right there in the paragraph. In that same paragraph, physical training is essential because this is when they introduce the topic, right? So the topic for discussion in this passage would be not much attention is placed on nutrition, right? So it says physical training is essential for success in sports, but the the very best results can only come through a combination of professional training and good nutrition. So that is point two. So it's a physical training is good. However, little attention is placed on nutrition. So we see that we get point two there. Point three now speaks about the athlete. The athlete needs to recognize that performance during the competitive season is strongly related to nutritional status outside the competitive season. So they are telling us really is that results are in your own words because you want to be able to say what is this saying to me in my own words. So what am I understanding here? And and that is how we tend to get our um that is how we tend to get our main ideas and how we tend to paraphrase because we want to be able to write it in our own words without quoting back everything that was said in the passage, right? So we'll see the combination of training and nutrition ensures the best results without resorting to performing enhancing drugs. Um, I don't know where I got that point from, but that point is not really supposed to be there. But it really supposed to be one where the combination of training and nutrition ensures the best results. right? So that is point three. Point four would be the value of nutrition can be seen especially where athletes may be attracted to fast food as well as fads and diets lacking essential nutrients, right? So we want to be able to capture everything that is being said. So paragraph four, so we have one, two, three. So paragraph three says many of our athletes often ignore the most vital parts of the diet, food containing vitamins and minerals that provide stamina and endurance in favor of fast food and lack nutrients. So what they're saying is that our athletes tend to prefer fast food over fast food over healthy food, right? So that is the basis of it. But yes, but what we are to really interpret this as is the value of nutrition can be seen, especially where athletes may be attracted to. So how do they value nutrition? Do they even value nutrition? Because if you value nutrition, would you really be attracted to fast food, right? So that is what they are really trying to provide for us here. That is the argument that they are trying to, the basis that they are trying to establish. All right, so let's look at paragraph. I don't have anything from paragraph four because paragraph four is basically an extension of paragraph three where they are using um, stuff such as, yeah, it's a continuation of paragraph three, right? So I think that was already covered in paragraph four. All right, so let's go on to paragraph five. Sorry, yeah, paragraph five. And we can kind of have an idea of of we can wrap up, sorry, our main ideas, right? So paragraph five, our main point can be something like, because we see that in the beginning of the topic sentence here is the pressure to use in performance enhancing drugs is increasingly dramatically because of lucrative prices, contracts, and product endorsement. So we can say the use of illegal drugs is increasing because of the rewards of winning. So the more people perform, the more people would want to the more prizes and the more riches that you can gain from performance, you find yourself getting an easier way out, which would be through performance enhancing drugs, right? So the last point that I have on the line there is drugs can cause harm to health even after retirement. So as much as athletes tend to use performance enhancing drugs to get a result, it's something temporary and is not always seen as the effect of it is not seen after retirement, right? So the person is just saying that after retirement, the athlete has to live and has to be healthy and has to be healthy as role model, set an example to be there for others, right? So drugs can cause harm to health even after retirement, so we must ensure that our champions are drug free and worthy role models. So that is basically what this passage is about. I think it's a pretty reasonable, easy passage to get. Remember, you ought to take it. Um, you ought to take it paragraph by paragraph, right? Usually, every paragraph will have a main idea, and usually you'll get five paragraphs. So, um, you just go each paragraph and say, what is this paragraph telling me This is just one example of how a summary should be written. It's not the only way in which the summary can be written. So, obviously, some people might have different points, but this is a general idea of what would be expected of you in the exam. So, your summary would sound something like this. The Caribbean is famous for its sporting talents. Although we welcome the emphasis on training in some countries, little attention is paid to nutrition in the Caribbean. Basic dietary provision should be observed before, during and after competition. The combination of training and nutrition ensures the best results without resorting to performance enhancing drugs. The value of nutrition can be seen especially where athletes may be attracted to fast food, as well as fads and diets lacking essential nutrients. The use of illegal drugs is increasing because of the rich rewards of the winning. We must remember that drugs can harm our health even when we retire, and we must ensure that our champions are drug free and worthy role models. So, as you can see, I had the 5 points. Usually, we have five main points, and the five main points are highlighted there in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I want you to see that this was 119 words, right? Things such as although here is actually right. So although there is a transitional word, right? So this is why I told you when we are looking at organization, they are going to expect you to use things such as although, um, as well as I think I did a class session with transitional words, I remember. So please refer to whatever notes we have um, on transitional words because they are helpful and they help keep your um, essay together. And I think it just helps with the coherence, yeah, and what they are asking. This will help keep your summary coherent, right? So that was summary writing. Remember, it's 25 marks in that section. It's an easy 25 marks. Just remember you stick to your content, five main ideas. You organize those five ideas, which is 10 marks, and then your language use and mechanic is another 10 marks, right? Let's go on to section B, which is the expository section. And I had given you videos to watch on the different types of formats that would be required in this section. Remember this section. No one knows what they would bring. However, we ought to learn everything, right? I mean, I know I always tell you that they would bring a notice because I've been having a feeling, but I think that has changed. Okay, so understanding profile expression. So let's look at the understanding profile. So this section is actually 30 marks. It carries 30 marks, right? 30 marks. So unlike summary where content was 5 marks, we see that content here is 10 marks. So you will be marked on the following criteria: format and convention, which is 3 marks. So as much as I told you, learn your format, learn your formats. Um, and I mean, it's amazing to see the breakdown of the marks for this section, because I think it's a lot of work for the section to just give 10 marks. I think content should have been more, but content sadly is less, right? So 10 marks is still plenty, because if you get 10 marks in the section, if you get your full 10 marks, it'll be really good, right? So learn your format, clarity of information. Again, that is understanding. So um, you would be given a scenario or something of that sort, and you would be asked to interpret it, right? And even though you are writing um, factual, expository is factual writing, you are to make it as real as possible, as though it happened already. So if you're writing a letter of complaint, you ought to put yourself in that position and write a letter of complaint. If you're writing a letter of apology, you put yourself in that position and you write a letter of apology. If you're writing an email, you write an email you do it as though you are actually writing that email. If you are doing so, what I'm trying to say to you is, every time whatever comes your way, put yourself in that scenario and see, because it will help you write better. So just don't say, well, you know what, I am writing this because it's an exam, but I want you to understand that you are writing it um because it's experiences we all face, you know. Even if you have to write a notice, a report, all of these things may be useful to you after you have written your exam. So please, I think this section is an easy section. It's easy marks. We just have to be able to understand and really be relevant in what we are saying, right? We don't want you to be talking about an apology and then you telling the person, well, you wrong in what you're saying or whatever, but be able to um, interpret it correctly, um, and show understanding that you have interpreted the information that is presented to you. Accuracy, completeness, and appropriateness, right? So again, I think I've covered that. Please be mindful that accuracy is 4 marks, so please don't add any additional information that is not presented in front of you. Please stick to the facts, stick to what is in front of you. You will know what to add, you will know what to leave out. Okay? Right, so let's move on to profile 2. You will be tested on organization, language, and mechanics, 20 marks, right? So this is how we get 30 marks. Organization of contents, again, is 10 marks. Language, usage, and mechanics, 10 marks. So arrangement of information. And we see that in the different areas that we looked at, whether it's a different type of writing, whether it's a letter, a notice, um, a report, we see that it follows a particular arrangement. All right. Please do not take for granted an email. Do not take for granted these things. Learn it. I have actually compiled a, a worksheet, well, yeah, a Word document for you um, with all the type of writing that you need to know for this section, right? So with format and everything, I've compiled it um, in terms of how the information is supposed to be presented. So taken some time to compile that because I'm not too sure. I gave you all videos to watch, but I'm not too sure whether or not you looked at it. So I will be placing that in the classroom. Correct use of structure and language accuracy of mechanics. So all right. So it's an easy pass. It's easy. Um, however, students fail to make marks in this section. So you tend to okay, let me touch on one thing here. For language usage here and what they mean by language usage. They simply means that if you are writing a letter of complaint, your language usage ought to be your word choices ought to be one that is of a letter of complaint. So if you're writing a letter, you want to be able to see I'm writing to inform, I'm writing to complain, I'm writing to apologize. We want to be able to see things like that. In a notice, we want to be able to see who, where, what, and so forth in that. In a report, we want to be able to see things such as time, such as in the who was present and what the report is really about. So again, there is certain things that is expected in terms of the language use. I had presented that. I think I have presented um, I've taught you that. However, that is one thing I want you to review. I want you to really review this section in depth. I've been putting a lot of emphasis on this section simply because it carries 30 marks, and I think it's an easy 30 marks you can get, right? So, content is 10 marks, organization, language, and mechanics is 20 marks. Mechanics is actually very important here because I want you to understand that your commas ought to be commas and not semicolons, right? Um, Certain things must be presented in a particular manner. Do not forget, don't ever forget that. And that is where your punctuation marks would be tested, your spelling would be tested. So, listen, if you're not sure how to spell sincerely, do not write sincerely, write respectfully, right? So, understand that these little things is what will make up the marks, right? So, it's very easy to get 30 out of 30 here. I know that you all have the potential to get full marks here. So let's look at the example that I have for you. Okay, so section B is 35 minutes. And I made an error in the last section because the last section, I think the suggested time is 40 minutes, not 35 minutes. But the suggested time here is 35 minutes. And even though you are given something like an email to write, or let's say just a letter, look at your time again. If they give you 35 minutes, be sure to write something that is worth 35 minutes. Even though you know that a letter, let's say it's easy to write a letter, it's easy to write a notice, be sure to capture everything that is given to you, right? Um, the suggested time um, is very helpful in terms of you, your writing. They would not have suggested a time for you if they didn't think you needed this amount of time. Okay, so please be mindful of that. So it says the situation presented in front of you says you purchase an item from a supermarket. On arrival home, you notice that the the expiry date had passed. You attempted to return the item, but you were told that it was on sale and the manager refused to give you a refund or replacement. Write a letter to Consumer Protection Group to a consumer protection group or the editor of a newspaper in which you complain about the quality of the product and treatment which you receive. All right, so your answer will be assessed on how well you formatted your letter, selected relevant and complete information, organize and express the information in your letter, and your use of appropriate grammar, sentence structure, vocabulary, spelling, and punctuation. You must Your letter must be in continuous prose. Make sure to include all the details that would help in highlighting the matter. Your letter should include details of complaint, for example, the date and time of purchase, cost of the item, specific conditions of the item, and response of staff. So again, it's kind of laid out in front of you. And I want you to be able to really look at what you'll be assessed on. So how you format your letter, the relevant and complete information, organize, organize and express the information in your letter. So this is where language would be tested and the use of appropriate grammar, again, mechanics. Okay. All right. So let's look at how this could happen. So first thing I would do when I'm looking at a question like this, I would see what are they asking me? What is the relevant information? And the relevant information here is you purchase an item from a supermarket. So you know your complaint is based on a purchase from a supermarket, not a variety store, not Courts, but a supermarket, which is key, right? Second point to take into consideration, on arrival home, you notice the expiry date had passed. So problem there one time, the expiry date was passed. Well, that's not a problem, but it's really something that you have noticed. Let's just say notice, because that wouldn't be the problem as yet, right? But the problem here would be in point 3, which is you attempted to return an item, but you were told that it was on sale and the manager refused to give you a response. So 3 things you have to look at. You purchase an item from a supermarket, you can make up a supermarket to make your letter sound more realistic. You have to be able to talk about when you notice that expiry date had passed, and you have to speak about the issue in returning the item. So you were given an option here, and the option is saying you can either write a consumer protection group, which is in our country consumer affairs. You have a right to complain on any goods that you are not satisfied with. So the consumer protection group. So understand who they are asking you to write. They are not asking you to write to the manager or somebody higher than the manager, the owner of the supermarket. They are asking you to form your complaint to consumer protection group or the editor of a newspaper. So you have an option here as to who you are going to write to. I'd say it's easier to write to consumer protection group than the editor in this section. All right. However, please note that that is also an option. So they can possibly bring a letter and ask you to write to the editor of a newspaper, right? Um, I am going to also upload some revision on writing letters to the editor as well by Monday. Okay, so in which you complain about the quality. So come on. So here you have to be able to write about, again, you're writing a lot of complaint and you're complaining about the quality of the product and the treatment in which you receive. So two things you're complaining about. One, an expired good, and two, the treatment in which you received, right? Right? So let's look at what your letter should be like. So you have to put an address. So obviously you are not going to put your home address, but you are going to put a random address. So this is actually written in block format, and most of the times business letters are usually written in block format, right? So I want you to take note of the format. You have to skip a line between the date and the recipient address. Again, your letter ought to be realistic and relevant information ought to be added. So even though they did not ask you to, they didn't mention the manager or they didn't mention the name of the consumer group, you have to make up these things, okay? Because you have to be able to write. You have to be able to write a complaint. And who are you writing the complaint to? Which consumer protection group are you writing to? So I chose to do this example because I want you to be able to understand that not everything will be put in the situation. However, you would have to be able to use your upstairs and think about, well, what is really making sense. So, the name of the person, write to the manager. Um, then you address the letter to the manager, and then you are putting the organization, which is the Fair Trade Commission, and the address of the organization. So again, when we think about if we are writing an address that is in Trinidad and you're writing to our consumer affairs in Trinidad, you want to be able to put an address such as Port of Spain or San Fernando or Chaguanas. You do not want to put address in Carapo. Is Carapo a place? Or you don't want to put an address like Lupino, right? So a common business place. All right. So you open with salutation because obviously, in a case like this, you have never. How often do you form launch a formal complaint on an organization? So I'm sure you would not be familiar with who the manager is, and if you are familiar, you can put a somebody name. But most times in cases like these, their sir, madam would work. Remember to put a comma, not a semicolon, because this is where your mechanics come in, and this is why you will be marked on stuff like your mechanics, right? So, the beginning of your letter, your introduction. So, we'll begin our introduction by saying the reason in which you are writing. You are writing to complain. So, I write to complain against Best Line Supermarkets, from which I purchased a box of cereal on October 10, 2014. So, again, we see the name of the supermarket and we are seeing the item in which you purchase as well as on the particular date in which you purchase it. Remember, I told you we are writing to talk about two complaints. So the first complaint is the treatment in which a person received, and two, the quality of the product. So language here is one of the tone we are getting here is one of um, dissatisfaction, and we ought to maintain that type of tone throughout our letter, right? So that was paragraph 1. the reason for writing. Paragraph 2 gives some background information. So the background information will be the item was on sale and you put how much money you paid for that item. Um, you give some details on arrival home. I realized that the product had expired since September. So seeing that you purchased it in October and it was expired in September. So again, your details must flow into one another. Think about what you're writing. So it was 1 month, it was expired by 1 month. I returned the package with the bill. So again, like typical, and that is why I told you when we first started with this section, I said, listen, it can happen to anybody, and because of that, we have to be able to make sure and make sense of everything that we're writing. So if you were in a situation like this and you purchase an item and you realize it was expired, would you just show up and say this is expired, or would you show up with a bill? Chances are you will show up with a bill, right? And you would ask to speak to the person in charge, right? So, and was directed to speak with the supervisor. Straight up with the bill. So the supervisor decided to see. He simply said that it was my duty to check any product I wanted to buy. So that is some background information that is said about what transpired on that said day on October 10, 2014. The problem now. Let's introduce the problem. The problem would be I went to this manager, explained the issue, and expressed my disappointment. I also requested a refund, but he too told me that I should have checked the date before making the purchase. So the reason for writing to the consumer um, agency or the Fair Trade Commission is really to say that I went to the people that's supposed to deal with the matter and they did not deal with it. So I'm coming to you who have right to investigate them. Right? So in addition, he said that their policies is no exchange or refund on sale items. He promised to speak to his colleagues, then he dismissed me and went to the telephone. I believe this treatment is unjust and would like you to intervene to rectify this matter. So again, we see that the response that he got from the supervisor, and even when he went on to talk to the manager, nothing was done. So the other option for him was to launch a formal complaint to the Fair Trade Commission to do an investigation into this matter. So this is an easy 30 marks. Again, when we are doing this section, we have to be mindful of our word choice. And when we are talking about a letter of complaint, we have to look, we are to use words such as unjust treatment. Or to use things such as I'm not satisfied, I'm disappointed. So we see that disappointment is used there. We see that dismissed is used there. We see that unjust is used there. We see that such things such as intervene to rectify this matter. All of those things are language usage. And remember, language usage takes up 10 marks. So again, it's easy. Let's go on to our closing so we know what a letter. And I think by now you should know that we begin our letter a type of way and we end our letter a type of way. So again, closing, we have yours sincerely. There is a signature as well as your full name at the bottom. Pretty easy, pretty reasonable. I think this section is a breeze. I just want you to remember to insert yourself into whatever situation is presented. So it'll be easier for you to um write whatever is given to you. Okay? Let's look at section C now. And section C is the narrative writing, which is a short story, right? So the following criteria will be used to assess the composition. And section C is really, it's a bit different from section A and B, simply because they are testing you on your content. Content is important here. Um, because they want to be able to see that you are able to present a story, right? So if you are asked to write a short story, um and I think this section is your suggested time is about 45 minutes. So in 45 minutes, what can you write in 45 minutes that makes sense? Because we can write a bunch of things and present a bunch of ideas, but we want to be able to um, write something that is worth reading. Okay, so you are asked to write on a prompt. They will give you a prompt and they will ask you to write something based on it. So in short story, listen, everybody will have a different story, even though they present you with the same um writing prompts. Everybody's stories will be different because everybody thinks differently. And it's really about creativity. So your story, you must have a plot, and a plot is basically what your story is about. So the events in the story must be linked appropriately. So I don't want you to go um rushing into anything for your story. And I want you to know that your short story for CSEC is different from your creative writing for SCE. Okay, because it's a short story, and where you would be able to focus on a lot of details in your short story in narrative short story, you have to stick to events, right? Events, but still have some kind of description in your story. So you'll be marked based on whether or not you link whether or not links. Okay, so I'll just go through what I have in front of me. Links must be maintained appropriate to the choice of technique. Conflicts must be satisfactory resolved. Action must be satisfactory concluded. Actions and events must be clearly motivated. For example, there must be some plausible reasons for the things that happen. Certain must be established. For example, there must be a clear indication of where and when the action takes place. So, again, it doesn't matter what you are given, you have to be able to establish events, you have to be able to establish conflict, you have to have actions in your story, you must have setting, and of course, character in your setting. So that is basically your storyline, and that is what is expected of you. You are expected to have a structure that is filled with action. It's called an action structure. Then characterization. Right. So I was just about to get there before I mention it. Characters must be no, characters must be believable. For example, characters must act and use language that is consistent with who they are. So character development is critical because remember we looked at the first marking. Looking at content here, and the first thing that we looked at is action. You must have a plot that is filled with action because we want to see conflict, we want to see action. Things have to be able to resolve itself. right? But characters, no. When you introduce your characters, make your characters believable and consistent, right? Any change in character, for example, personality behavior, must be clearly established. Characters must be sufficiently developed. Dialogue, when used, should be functional. For example, may develop a character, action, and atmosphere. And I like when students use dialogue in their stories, but not too much dialogue to kill your story, right? So dialogue should be functional, right? And functional simply means it will develop character, action, and atmosphere. Okay, so that is basically what we would be looking at for. Should I? Oh, right. So of course you have organization. Um, in every type of writing you will have content and you will have organization, right? So your details and events must be logically and effectively sequenced. You must be able to effectively use language, so appropriate choice of words to create character, atmosphere, and setting. Economic and lively use of language creates story elements. So come on. We want to be able to use our language strategically, right? Correct use of structure of the language as well as accuracy of mechanics. So when we use dialogue, if we are not aware of if we do not know how to use dialogue in our story, then do not use dialogue in your story, because you can't just decide you're going to use dialogue and don't open with a quotation mark and close with a quotation mark, right? You have to be able to be mindful of where your punctuation is in dialogue. So if you are not too sure how to use dialogue, please go and do some revision on that. Okay, so let me go on to show you a sample of a short story that I have selected for you. I'd hope that you will see my screen just now, but I have a feeling that I forgot to share my screen. Anyway, so we are looking at section C, which is our section, our narrative writing section. The suggested time is 45. Um, The instructions is clear. It says you must write in standard English, however, dialect may be used in conversation. And the thing about it, this is a Caribbean exam, and we have dialect, sorry, in our Caribbean countries, our islands, and it's important to embrace these things. We have writers such as Naipaul, yes, Naipaul, and they tend to use um, the Creole in their writing to just enhance it and make writing just lively, right? And I urge you to just embrace our culture, our language. I'm not saying that you have to write your entire story in dialogue, but maybe your character, develop your character as one way they can enhance the language, right? So that is just something aside, a suggestion. So in your answer, you will be assessed on how well you develop and organize the content in your essay, use language appropriate to your audience, purpose, and content, and control your grammar, sentence structure, paragraphs, and vocabulary. So again, section C focuses on content. Content is based on your storyline, which is a plot. Your plot must always have actions as well as characteristics, organization, language use, right? So write a short story about an exciting moment in somebody's life. And I this is not a past paper from this is not a past paper question from CXC, but this is just an example of a short story written by a teacher, right? So I wanted you to just get an idea of what is expected in a short story as opposed to what you may be familiar with, right? So when you get something like write a story about an exciting moment in somebody's life, how do you approach something like this? Because everybody has had an exciting moment. How can I put that in my writing? How can I develop my writing to suit that? All right, so let's go to that example. All right. So the title of the story is called The Infamous Football Incident, right? Remember it's an a story based on It's a story based on an excited moment. So this person decided to write about an infamous football incident. So we are talking about an incident. So I'm going to read the entire story for you, and then I'll be able to highlight the things that I want to highlight for you. So it says. When I look back at the long, hot summer of 2018, one memory always comes flooding back to me, despite all the years that have passed. It never fails to put a smile back on my face, even though when my grandmother finally caught me and my brother Jamal, punishment was severe. I guess I was 11 that year, and Jamal was 10. We call her mom, as some people of Jamaican origin call their grandmother. As for her, she called us many, many names, not all of them polite by any means. Her favorite line, after we had done something naughty, was, "Just wait till your mother come home," in a voice like rich velvet, which still somehow managed to pierce our eardrums and frazzle our brains with fear. She said that a lot She said that a lot because, in her opinion, we were as wicked as any real life villain could be, that being the unchangeable nature of young boys. That afternoon, as always, we were in the back garden of our southeast London terrace home. I say garden because it wasn't much more than a yard. However, it was enough for me and Jamal, football mad kids that we were. We didn't care that France had won the World Cup. This was our own field of dreams, where, for a short time each day, while my mom cooked the dinner, he was Jesse cooked the dinner, right? He was Jesse Lingard and I was Harry Kane. It didn't matter that we were both almost as round as we were tall. We were soccer stars, lords of the pitch, top earners. The ball went back and forth like a rubber yo yo without any string. My mom had told us that we couldn't kick the ball over waist height, and we obeyed that instruction, carefully measuring the strength of our kicks. It didn't matter so much. We could still tackle and dribble, tackle and dribble, tackle and dribble. We could do that for hours until the sublime summer sun made our chubby torsos sticky with sweat. Little did we know that what was to become in the family as the infamous football incident was about to happen. The kitchen overlooked the yard, and as she paced back and forth, concocting the dinner, Mum always found time to peer territorially, like a squinty eye hawk, through the window to check on any misbehavior. Sometimes she would banish whatever vegetable she was preparing at us, as if she was going to use it as some kind of instrument of torture. I still can't remember how exactly it happened. I can't remember which knee or leg or other body part the ball bounced off or even whose body it was. All I can remember is the ball whizzing through the air like a space shuttle taking off. Except Unlike the shuffle, the ball was not heading out to space. It headed straight for the kitchen window. We saw it hit the pane as if in slow motion, the glass splintering into 1,000 shards, accompanied by an air splitting crash. Silence for a second. Then the sound of my mom yelling and screaming like a mad woman. They were screams of outrage, fury, and a desire for immediate and ruthless revenge. We froze. I looked at Jamal in complete wide eyed horror. He returned the gaze. I swear his mouth was open down to his knee. Mine, I think, was on the floor. "What are we going to do?" exclaimed Jamal, in the highest pitch I had ever heard him utter. There was only one thing for it: run. I yelled, and we made a dash for the backyard door. We were we were Jesse Lingard and Harry Kane no longer. We were using Bolt. So I want you to be able to understand that the character the characterization in this story. The characterization was placed more on the grandmother, and it looked at her origin as a Jamaican woman. And we know how Caribbean people discipline their children, but they are Jamaican. They have Jamaican origin living in London. Okay. And even at the end of the story, they no longer they were no longer footballers, English footballers, but they were now Jamaican Usain Bolt, right? All of these things are essential in developing characterization. So, my mom was introduced very early in the story, and a lot of information was given about my mom. She called them many names, and they were not all polite names. We know that her favorite line was, "Just wait till your mother come home." So we know that she was a Jamaican woman. We learn things such as she would interact with them and banish the vegetables as though she wanted to hit them with it. So we saw things, and eventually it built up to the incident whereby break they actually broke the window, and she screamed at them. She was angry and she wanted revenge. So the character was really developed throughout the story, right? So the main character we see in the story is mom, right? So I want us to understand too that this story wasn't a typical story that started about well, the sun was shining bright and the place was cold, and it was not a descriptive beginning, right? It spoke about it gave setting because it told us it was a summer in 2018, but it was a flashback. It was a flashback, and a flashback in a story gives a story more depth by revealing details that help readers understand characters' motives, also add a tension and helps advance the plot. And it did advance the plot because when we understood that my mom was a very serious woman who was not afraid of sharing licks, right? And it kind of makes us want to know, well, what exactly happened in order for my mom to um, punish them severely, right? So that in itself tells us that, listen, the story is going to be excited, based on the character, right? So you want to be able to give I think flashback is a very ideal um, way to start a short story. However, it all depends on what you are given to write about. Because it said the prompt was write a story about an exciting moment. So the person decided to go back in time and tell us about an exciting moment. So a flashback is really a flashback being used here is very functional, I would say. And I would recommend if you get something like that to a flashback because it builds attention and then kind of excites you and you'd want to know more about what is going to happen, right? But you have to be careful in terms of using a flashback because the way in which a flashback was used here, they decided to do a lot of development on one particular character, right? Another way in which characterization was developed is that these boys, even though they thought they were footballers, they were um they nowhere near the shape of footballers, but they didn't come out and say that they were fat children, but they used words such as they were round and their chubby torsos and stuff like that. So again, all of these things are instrumental in developing characters, as well as I'm seeing a lot of similes being used here. Um, her voice was like rich velvet. I saw that she was being compared. Um, they were being compared to as wicked as real life villains. I'm seeing things such as the ball went back and forth like a rubber yo-yo. So again, comparison is important in your story because it helps us. I wouldn't let me just not say comparison, but similes, metaphors, these things are important. Personifications, everything that you've learned in your life in terms of writing anything about stories, come on, use it to develop your character, right? So let me just go through the structure of the story, right? So remember, we are looking at two things. We are looking at characteristics, and we are looking characterization, and we are looking at action, right? Our action structure is really our storyline, right? So we get an idea that these guys went when these guys were with their grandmother for the summer and they decided to play football and the football hit the window plane and so forth, right? So in the beginning, exposition. Your story also always has to have an exposition to not jumping into your story immediately. So your exposition is being able to talk about setting, establish your setting, establish what is happening around you, your atmosphere, your time, your place, set the tone for your story, give some information on what is taking place, right? Or who are the characters, who are you introducing in your story. So we know that in this particular story, we see it's a hot summer in 2018. We know that it's the narrator, his brother, and grandmother. So when we are writing our story, you can write a story either in first person or third person, right? This story was written in first person because we are seeing where it's personal, right? Okay, so we know that the punishment was very severe after they were caught. So, I mean, so from the exposition, and because it's a um, flashback, we see that something is going to happen in the story whereby somebody is going to get in trouble and the punishment is going to be severe. Then we go on to talk about the middle of our story. And in the middle of our story, we would see action, the rise in action. So we see that afternoon, So it gives us an idea of what was taking place on that particular afternoon. So we know that the boys were enthusiastic about football. We know that because he said football, football mad kids. He said that they knew that France had won the World Cup. So there's a lot of, we know that Jesse Lingard, Harry Kane, we know that these are footballers. We know that these guys seem to really be enthusiastic about football. So we get that kind of information, which helps us to understand, well, okay, if they are so into football, then clearly they are going to try to be these individuals, or probably try to do the same thing they would have seen while watching football or whatever. So it starts to get us thinking. We also get a physical description of the characters. So there's another comparison that is done there, because we see that as much as they see themselves as um footballers, it says it didn't matter that we were both almost as round as we were tall. We were soccer stars, lords of the pitch, top earners. So we get an insight of, their confidence here in terms of football. So it gives us some description of the other characters. So in our middle of the story, a problem is usually presented to us. And the problem that is presented to us here is that there is going to be a football incident, because, again, there is action, there's rising action that is telling us that, listen, the ball was going back and forth like a yo-yo. We saw that the grandmother had warned them about kicking the ball too high. But however, they were tackle, dribble, and tackle, dribble, and tackle, dribble. And so all of that kind of builds the suspense as to, well, what is going to happen. And then the last line of that paragraph said, little did we know that was what was to become known as a family as the infamous football incident. Remember, this is a flashback, right? So the person can give some sort of details there, right? So we know that there is going to be a football incident. However, we didn't see the football incident just as yet. So again, there is some suspense. So it went on to talk about the characteristics of the grandmother. So we saw that the grandmother would look at them with such as peer territorially, like a squinty-eyed hawk. When we think of all these things, we see that the grandmother is one who um, she was serious, and she was serious about them not getting in trouble. So imagine how she would have, and it ties back to the beginning. Their punishment was severe simply because their grandmother was looking at them. She had spoken to them. So again, it's building the suspense. Then in every story have a climax, and a climax is really the highest point of the story, the highest peak of the story. So the highest peak of the story, I still can't remember how exactly it happened, but however, listen, the ball shattered the window. And I think it was good that we I think it was very strategic in terms of saying that we saw it hit the pane as if in slow motion, the glass splintering. So it kind of like, as much as this is the highest point of the story, we see in a kind of slow motion taking place here, whereby, oh my goodness, the thing that the grandmother had warned them about is actually happening. What is she going to do to them? And she started to yell, and then we see a pace kind of picks up here when she started to yell at them, as though she wanted ruthless revenge. So we get more in terms of, this is what happened. There was a build up in terms of, well, this is who the grandmother is, and this is what she stands for. And she knew that they misbehaved. She always kept an eye on them and to ensure that but that one day they decided to do exactly opposite as to what she had told them to do, and we saw her personality come to life in terms of her reaction to what they did. So again, pay in mind the sentences, the sentence variety, because I'm seeing silence for a second. That was, there's a full stop there. We froze, a full stop there. So all of those things kind of help us understand what is taking place in the story, right? So short sentences are important in stories that kind of give us the effect of what is being said by the narrator, right? So I looked at Jamal in complete wide-eyed horror. So again, imagery is important. Wide-eyed horror. You can imagine that person, that the face that is being presented to us here. Again, we are seeing some dialogue here. What are we going to do? Exclaimed Jamal. We see run, right? Pay in mind our punctuation. So we open in quotation marks, and then we put our punctuation mark, and then we close in quotation mark, right? So yeah, run. I yelled at I yelled, and we made a dash for the backyard. So again, I want you to bear in mind that they were no longer they were no longer footballers, but they were now bulls. And that is how the story was ended. And the resolution of the story, which is the ending of the story, this type of ending is a tie back ending, right? And it's a tie back ending because it goes back to the beginning of the story. Because in the beginning of the story, we know that their punishment was severe, and as much as they ran like Usain Bolt, their grandmother caught them. So this is a real nice story, and this is the type of writing I want from you. Think about it. It's a short story. So whatever you write, you cannot give too much detail, but you have to be able to make sure that your actions are presented in an effective manner, right? So that is your short story. Okay, so I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to take a short break, and then I will resume with section D. Okay, so we are on to the last section, section D, and it's our argumentative writing. For this section in particular, you can be given either an argument to write. You can be given a speech, you can be given a letter to the editor. So it varies. However, you all have the right structure. We've done a lot of work in this section, so you'll be fine. So marks will be awarded in two areas, right? The first area, which is area one, is 15 marks. 15 marks are, so this particular piece of writing, you will be marked based on expression. Yeah, it's more on expression than content, right? But they broke it down into areas. So area one carries 15 marks. It's your content, your arguments, and comments. So how you select your information or your details must be relevant to the focus of the argument. The argument must show a clear sense of the writer's awareness of audience. So again, if you are writing uh, uh, if you are doing an argument, you always have to bear in mind your audience. Okay, so whether you're writing to the editor, whether you're writing a speech to your students in your school, or whether or not you are taking a position on something, right? So the writer must use a register and tone appropriate to the audience. So obviously, if we are doing an argumentative writing, you are expected to use particular use a particular tone, your language must be of an argument, right? Your word choice and so forth. The writer's purpose must be clearly linked to audience needs. So whether or not you are writing to give an example, to inform, to persuade, to convince a particular point of view, right? In addition to that, your supporting details, and I want to talk to you a bit about your supporting details because we have done topic, sentence, evidence. No, topic, sorry. Topic, sentence, explanation, evidence, and if we want to go further, a linking it back, right? But we focus on three things. TEE, remember that when we are doing any type of writing, any type of arguments, right? In illustrating, explaining, or expanding the argument, the writer must make use of a range of strategies. So you must be able to give examples, you must be able to define, show cause and effect, make meaningful comparison. So you have to be able to use a range of strategies. So, yes, I don't want it to be one whereby you are only given examples in your you're only given examples in your story. Like, no, that is not going to happen, right? Um, in addition to that, we want to be able to argue from a consistent point of view. So it means that the writer may anticipate the opposition arguments but must not contradict. So please, if you're taking one position, stay on that one position, right? Um, Marks will also be presented based on organization. So it must be logical. It must be, you must have enough reasoning, right? So the writer must present the details in a logical sequence that maintains the focus of the argument. The logical sequence of ideas, details must be clear within sentences and across sentences in paragraph and between paragraph. The conclusions the writers draw must arise naturally and logically from the argument presented. This section so this is still part of the 15 marks, right? So the 15 marks will come based on the content and the organization of the content, because the organization of the content ought to be logical and must have reasoning in it. Area 2, which is 10 marks, pay attention. It'll be based on the correct use of structures of the language and accuracy of mechanics. So an easy 10 marks here. The bulk of the work goes into the content and the organization. So I'm expecting for language use and mechanics, that is very easy for you, right? So let's go on to look at an example of an argument. Okay, so as we know, section D, we are also expected to write this in 45 minutes, an average suggested time of 45 minutes. Your answer should be approximately 250 to 300 word length. So we're seeing that the only section that doesn't have a word limit is section B, and so um you can use your discretion in section B. But when it comes to this section, 250 to 300 words, right? So we know that usually we'll have an introduction, we'll have about 3 paragraphs, and we'll have a conclusion, right? So in your answer, you will be assessed on the following: clarity, organization, and development of your argument, correctness of grammar, sentences, paragraph, vocabulary, spelling, and punctuation. So the question here is, the government should ban the importation of all fruits and vegetables in support of local production. So they said, write an essay giving your views. So what side are you going to take? based on what is presented. Because when you have something like write an essay expressing your views, what do you think they are asking you to do here? Are they asking you to convince? Are they asking you to um, take a position, persuade? What are they asking in this paragraph, in this question? Sorry. All right, so this is an argumentative essay by Miss Anush Harrison Jackson. I decided to use her example simply because I didn't have time to formulate anything for you. So I decided that let's go with what she has and let's analyze it, right? So she starts, indeed, banning the importation of all fruits and vegetables in support of local production would automatically cause a significant increase in the government's revenue. However, has anyone stopped to consider what this ban would do to international or trade relationship? Not only will this act damage the cordial relationship that exists among countries, but it will also lessen competition, lessen option, and cause a spiral in the cost of certain locally grown fruits and vegetables. It went on to say, Caribbean and European countries enjoy some measure of amiable relationship between because of trade. They are able to import and export freely among countries. Now, if the government ban the importation of all fruits and vegetables in support of local production, would these countries be willing to continue trading with the government? Why would they want to when the government has reduced their exportation figures and directly or indirectly reduced their gross domestic product? Studies have shown that countries are more reluctant to conduct business with countries that do not import their product. Additionally, this act of banning all fruits and vegetables in support of local production will not only put a strain on international relationship but also a strain on our economy. Due to the lack of importation, there will be less competition and this often results in an increase in prices. Local farmers will now determine how they will price certain fruits and vegetables, thus removing it out of the reach of the average man or woman. Sure, there are some who would agree that the government can regulate prices, but does the government have the time to regulate all fruits and vegetables? Lack of competition will also mean less opportunities. Some fruits and vegetables are not grown locally because of our tropical climate. Hence, we can only source them from overseas. If the government should ban the importation of all fruits and vegetables, then the consumer who have always been purchasing these other fruits such as strawberries, kiwis, pears, apples, cauliflower, and others may rebel as their options of fruits and vegetables are now limited. The government should not ban the importation of all fruits and vegetables in support of local production, as this move will damage international and regional relationship amongst countries, reduce healthy trading competition, and limit consumers' choices. So, pretty convincing. And the purpose of writing your own views is really to convince somebody to take your side of this whole topic, right? So it starts with an introduction. And I want you to see that when we are doing an introduction, we tend to when we are doing an argument or we are presenting our views on a particular topic, we want to be able to give some kind of appeal. We must be able to appeal to the reader in terms of the importance of the topic and or the side in which we are choosing for that particular topic. So we see that the person decided to take front in terms of um the other side, right? Because they said banning the importation of all fruits and vegetables in support of local production would automatically cause a significant increase in government revenue. So they didn't say that no, it's not going to cause an increase in revenue, but they're saying if we have to be able to weigh the options, it's going to be more um, it's going to be better in terms of not banning versus banning for us because you have more reason. So when we are presenting our views, make sure and go with the one that has make sure and go with the stronger argument, right? And then there is the thesis statement that I've taught you extensively, and we know how to do our thesis statement. So we talk about the topic, right? So the topic, and we put it in that last line of our introduction. That is where your thesis goes. Then topic sentence one, we see that Caribbean and European countries enjoy some measures of amiable relationship because of trade. So we go back to the thesis statement and say, where is that in the thesis statement? Right, it's right there in the thesis statement. Not only will this damage the cordial relationship. So again, the person that is reading a lot of essays is looking for a particular structure in this section, right? So it's looking for that thesis statement because all your points should be presented in a logical manner. So if I'm marking this, I would automatically just go and say, okay, let me check topic one, let me check topic two, topic three. It's right there in the thesis statement. And then I go on to look for the explanation, and then I go on to look for the examples, right? So in the first topic, we saw studies have shown that the countries are more reluctant. In topic sentence two, we saw a lot of rhetorical questions being used there. Remember, there are particular devices that are necessary in order for us to capture and appeal to the reader. One of those would be rhetorical questions, right? Then we go on to look at topic sentence three. Lack of competition will also mean less options, and we saw they putting stuff like kiwis and pears and things that are not produced locally. They're given an example of that. As well as the conclusion, we see that in the conclusion we restate the thesis statement, right? But we, of course, when we are restating the thesis statement, we are saying it in a different, um, we are not putting it back exactly as to how it was placed in the introduction. One of the things that I would have done here differently was add some final points. I always say when we are writing our views or presenting our argument, you want to put something at the end that makes your statement clear. So, yes, the person said the government should not ban the importation of all fruits, but I think you should still try to appeal one last time to the reader. So, I don't believe in a conclusion just having restated thesis, but I believe that there should be a final, you should have a final opinion or something that you would want to have leave the reader with. So we have done this and you all are familiar with it. So that brings me to the end of our what is this? Yeah, it brings me to the end of our it brings me to right, I was saying that. Right? So it brings me to the end of our review, our CSEC paper 2 review, and I hope that this video would help you in terms of having a better understanding of the mark scheme, having a better understanding of how to approach these questions. Okay, so I will end today. Whatever I need to upload, I would upload it by Monday for you guys to go through. Any questions, comments about this video, anything that you are not sure about, not clear about, please let me know. Okay, so thank you very much.